131873, the open line number, 18 minutes after 8 o'clock. Now, 37 years ago today, the quiet streets of southwest Sydney became a battlefield. Sunday, September 2, 1984. It was Father's Day. And while Sydney-siders were giving gifts to Dad, two bikie gangs went to war, the Bandidos and Comancheros. They clashed outside the Viking Tavern in Milperra. 500 people were inside, attending a motorbike meet-up. Suddenly, bullets started flying. The bikies shot at each other in the car park. Bystanders ran to safety, hiding behind trees and parked cars. And the massacre claimed the lives of 7 people. 6 bikies and an innocent teenage girl. She was selling raffle tickets at the time. Now, I contacted Simon Boda, the crime reporter at Channel 9, to say, who can I talk to about the Milperra massacre? And he said, mate, you've got to get John Garvey on the line. He was one of the first police officers on the scene. The former senior detective remembers it well all these years on. John Garvey, good morning to you.
Good morning, Mr. Fordham.
Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us. Can you remember getting the call?
Sadly, I can. It was a Sunday, of course, early afternoon. We were working at the Regional Crime Squad at that stage. I was on the Armed Hold-Up Unit. We had a number of the Crime Squad detectives working. The first calls that came over on that afternoon were very confused. The first call over the police radio was that there were armed persons at the hotel. We believed at that stage that it was an armed robbery. We started heading towards the hotel. A number of us, we had some SWAT equipment with us, some shotguns and ballistic vests. We started to proceed to the hotel. The team got very confused over the radio. There were talks of shots being fired, people wounded. By the time we got there were police helicopters had arrived overhead. It was a terribly confused scene when we arrived. There were still people armed. We could see people armed down in the car park proper. Detective Sergeant Trevor Baker was with us. He ordered Detective Steve York, Mick McGann and myself and a uniform officer to get into the hotel and start moving the patrons out because there were still people drinking, unbelievably, in the hotel at the time.
So hang on a moment. There were people having a beer in the pub even though there'd been a massacre?
Absolutely, yes.
And tell me about the 14-year-old girl, Leanne Walters, who was selling raffle tickets.
Yeah, she was there. Leanne had an unfortunate life, but was a decent enough young kid. Had a very supportive father, a girl, but she was there with some friends. She was selling raffle tickets in the hotel. She'd walked out into the car park proper from the hotel, and she was hit in the lower part of the face with a round from a .357 Magnum rifle. And sadly, she passed away almost immediately.
And John, I'm told that when you turned up, the first person you saw was a wounded bikie with a smoking shotgun in his hands.
Yeah, a fellow known as, under his bikie name was Sunshine, and we didn't know the layout of the hotel particularly well, so we walked out the back door of the hotel still trying to clear the patrons out. I had a uniform officer with me and unfortunately walked straight into Sunshine. He'd been shot in the face. He had a considerable amount of blood over the left-hand side of his face and over his shirt. He was quite belligerent. I think he saw himself as protecting the others. But after a short exchange with him, we both agreed we'd put our weapons down. He then went in and spoke to the others, and I then joined him in the centre of the car park where the Comancheros were corralled. And with his help, we were able to get the weapons off the rest of the gang. We placed those down with the shotguns, and then we were able to signal to the ambulance officers and other police to come into the car park proper and start working on all of the wounded.
And tell me, just give us some context. Was this a moment when Sydney really realised, oh, hang on a moment, these bikie wars are becoming very bloody in our own backyard here?
Oh, I think it was a very sobering moment. 7 dead. There was something like 16 or 18 had to be stretchered away in serious condition. I was very surprised, in fact, that we didn't have a greater number of dead. The investigation, the subsequent investigation, the task force, when we looked at it, there was a considerable number of smaller incidents that had preceded the conflict at the hotel that day. but it was probably a big wake-up call. And, of course, the subsequent investigation, when on the 21st of September that month, we rearrested some 40-odd members of both gangs and charged each of them with 7 counts of murder. It was just an unbelievably large task that was set before the task force.
I'll tell you what, John Garvey, 37 years on, your memory's still pretty sharp.
It's not something that you forget very readily, Ben.
Sure.
And, there were such great characters involved, both in the bikie gangs and in the police involved in the investigation. Men like Ron Stevenson, who sadly gone, Arnie Tees, who's also gone, Mick McGann, Steve York, just so many really good people that were involved in it. But I think anyone that was involved on the day or in the subsequent task force saw it as one of those things that we had to send out a very clear message.
No doubt about it. And something you'd never forget either. And we appreciate you coming on and sharing your memories, and you're a good man for doing so today. And we think about the family of young Leanne Walters, who was killed on this day 37 years ago. John, I'm glad to know you're sounding so good, and I hope retirement's treating you well, and hopefully we can have a beer one day.
Look forward to it. Thank you very much.
Good on you. John Garvey, one of the first police to turn up on the scenes 37 years ago at the Milperra Massacre.